Let's start with something familiar. Let's read the word problem together. Ready? Read. There are 12 students in PE class separated into 4 equal teams. How many students are on each team? Okay, so we know that there are 12 students, and these 12 students are being put on 4 equal teams. Pause the video and draw an array to match the story. And let's make the columns the teams and circle the teams. Then come back and compare your array with mine. Does your array look similar to mine? I made the columns the teams, so I can see 4 teams. Now tell me a division expression to represent the story. Remember, a division expression doesn't have an equal sign. 12 divided by 4. And what's the quotient? The quotient is 3. Now pause the video and write an answer statement to answer the question, how many students are on each team? There are 3 students on each team. Now, how can we check our division to make sure that we're correct? We can use multiplication. We can think we have 4 groups of 3, so that's 4 times 3, which equals 12. Since the product we got is the same as the total that we started with, we know we're correct. Now, let's think a little bit more deeply about this. Does the quotient 3 represent the number of groups or the size of the groups? Pause the video to explain your thoughts. The quotient 3 represents the size of the groups. We can see 3 circles in each group or 3 people on each team. Let's revise the story a bit. Now there are still 12 students in PE class. Exactly 3 students are needed on each team. How many teams can be made? Do we need to draw a new array for this problem? Why or why not? Pause the video to explain your thinking. I'm thinking we can use this same array. In this array, we can see 12 people total, we can see 3 people on each team, and we can see how many teams can be made. Tell me a division equation to represent this story. 12 divided by 3 equals 4. Now pause the video and write an answer statement to answer the question, how many teams can be made? They can make 4 teams. Now, does the quotient in this story represent the size of the groups or the number of groups? This time, the quotient represents the number of groups. So the same array can be used to represent a situation where the group size is unknown, like in our first story, or where the number of groups is unknown, like in our second story. Let's try another story. This story is about the same PE class, but now another student has joined the class, so there are 13 students. Let's read it. There are 13 students in PE class, separated into 4 equal teams. How many students are on each team? Tell me a division expression that would match this story. 13 divided by 4. Now you may be thinking, wait a minute. When we divide, we need equal groups, and 13 isn't going to divide equally into 4 groups. Let's draw an array to show what we're talking about. We know we have 13 students and we need 4 equal teams. So here are 4 teams. And now let's put the students on the teams. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So now this is 12 students, but we have 13 students. If I put that other student on a team, then the groups won't be equal anymore. So I'm just going to draw the circle here. What does this one circle here represent? It's 1 extra student. Here we see that we can make 4 equal teams with 3 students on each team, but there will be 1 student left over, or an extra student. Pause the video now and write a statement to answer the question, how many students are on each team? Then come back and compare your statement with mine. Here's what I wrote. There are 3 students on a team. There is 1 student left over. Now our expression was 13 divided by 4. Sometimes when we divide a number into equal groups, there's an extra amount or an amount left over. We call that extra amount, that leftover amount, the remainder. Everyone say remainder. Now in 13 divided by 4, does the 4 represent the number of groups or the size of the groups? The 4 represents the number of groups. So that means the quotient would represent the size of the groups. And what is the size of the groups? The size of the groups is 3. We can see 3 in each group. So what is the quotient? The quotient is 3. And what's the remainder or the leftover amount? The remainder is 1. When we divide and there's a remainder or that leftover amount, we can state our answer like this. The quotient is 3, the remainder is 1. Or we could say or write, the quotient is 3 with a remainder of 1. Now, how could we use multiplication to check our division? Pause the video to talk out your thinking. You may be thinking, well, we could multiply 4 times 3 because we have 4 groups of 3. But that gives us 12, which isn't the total amount that we started with. So that doesn't really prove our answer is correct. But then we could add in that remainder, add that remainder to the product. 12 plus that remainder of 1 equals 13. And 13 is the total amount that we started with, so we are correct. Great thinking. Now let's revise the story again just a little bit. Let's read it. Ready? There are 13 students in PE class. Exactly 3 students are needed on each team. How many teams can be made? Now, what division expression matches this story? 13 divided by 3. Do we need to draw a new array? No, this array still matches. We can see 13 people and 3 people on each team. Now, pause the video and write the quotient and the remainder, and then come back and check your work with mine. Did you write that the quotient is 4 and the remainder is 1? What do the quotient and the remainder mean in this story? The quotient means that there are 4 equal teams, and the remainder of 1 means that there's 1 extra person, 1 person not on a team. Pause the video now and write a statement to answer the question, how many teams can be made? One statement you could have written is they can make 4 teams and there will be 1 extra student, but that's not the only correct statement you could have written. Now watch as I draw a number bond to represent the story. Compare the number bond to the rest of our work. What do you notice? Pause the video to talk out your thinking. Hopefully you notice that 13 is the total number of students. 12 represents the students who are in equal groups, and 1 is the remainder. Let's try another story problem. Let's read it together. Christy bought 13 roses. If she puts 6 roses in each vase, how many vases will she use? Will there be any roses left over? What division expression matches this story? 13 divided by 6. Now pause the video and draw an array to match the story and circle the groups. Then come back and we'll compare. Welcome back. Does your array look similar to mine? In the array, we can see 2 groups of 6 and 1 left over. Now pause the video again and write the quotient and the remainder and write an answer statement to answer each of the questions. Then come back and we'll compare. Did you find the quotient was 2 and the remainder was 1? This time, instead of writing out quotient and remainder, I abbreviated and wrote Q equals 2 to tell what the quotient is and R equals 1 to tell what the remainder is. In the story, the quotient 2 means that Christy will use 2 vases, and the remainder of 1 means that there will be 1 rose left over. So those helped me to answer the questions. Again, let's revise our story a little bit. Now, Christy bought 13 roses and wants to put them equally in 2 vases. How many roses will be in each vase? Is this the same array? Yes, the array also matches this story. But how is our interpretation of the array different this time? Pause the video to talk out your thinking. Maybe you said that in the first story, we didn't know the number of vases, and in the second story, we didn't know how many roses went in each vase. Or maybe you said that in the first story, we were finding the number of groups, and in the second story, we were finding the size of the groups. Pause the video now and write the expression for this new story and the quotient and remainder, and then write an answer statement to answer the question. Then come back and compare your work with mine. Here's my work. Does yours look similar? Now, how could we check our work for either of these situations? Pause the video to check our work and then come back and we'll discuss. Here are two different ways that you may have checked your work. You could have multiplied 2 times 6 to get 12 and then added on that remainder of 1 to get 13. Or you could have shown your thinking in a number bond. This 12 represents the 2 groups of 6, so the roses that were in the vases, and this 1 represents the remainder of 1, or that 1 extra rose. Now let's turn our array into a tape diagram that shows 13 as 2 equal groups of 6 with a remainder of 1. To start, I can draw a rectangle around my array, and then I'll erase all the flowers inside and label the total as 13. Now we need to show our groups. We know we have 2 equal groups of 6, but 6 plus 6 equals 12, not 13. So we'll need a third part to show the remainder. That part will be much smaller than the other parts because we just have a remainder of 1. So I'll make a small part here on the side to represent the remainder, and I can partition the rest of the tape into 2 equal groups of 6. And then I'll label this part here as the remainder of 1. Now, how does this tape diagram show that 13 divided by 6 has a quotient of 2 with a remainder of 1? Pause the video to explain your thinking. In the diagram, we can see that there's a total of 13 divided into 2 equal groups of 6, and then there's this much smaller part that represents the remainder of 1. Let's try another problem. Let's read it together. Christy bought 13 roses and divided them equally into 4 vases. How many roses will be in each vase? What division expression matches this story? 13 divided by 4. Now pause the video and draw a tape diagram that shows 13 roses being divided equally into 4 groups. Then come back and compare your drawing with mine. Welcome back. Does your tape diagram look similar to mine? Using our basic facts, or even the work we did earlier in the lesson, we know that 13 cannot be equally divided into 4 groups. So we knew there would be a remainder. So we needed 4 equal groups and then 1 smaller part to represent the remainder. Now, what's the quotient, what's the remainder, and what do these numbers mean in the story? Pause the video to write the quotient, write the remainder, and write an answer statement to answer the question. Then check your work. When you get back, we'll discuss. Welcome back. The quotient is 3 and the remainder is 1. The quotient 3 means that there will be 3 roses in each vase, so that's what I wrote for my answer statement. And the remainder of 1 means that there will be 1 rose remaining, or 1 rose left over, not in a vase. And so I also wrote that. You can also see here how I checked my work using a number bond and using multiplication and addition. Does your work look similar? Excellent work today, friends. I think we're ready for the problem set. On the screen are the must-do problems for the problem set. Set a timer or watch the clock for 10 minutes to work on these problems. If you have extra time,